The 10th of October is World Mental Health Day, and this year's theme is Make Mental Health and Well-Being for All a Global Priority. Let's look at mental health now. This is after 2 years of the coronavirus pandemic, which saw a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression worldwide. I'm now joined by Cassey Chambers from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Cassey, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How severe is the prevalence of mental health in South Africa?
Well, what we know, as you just mentioned, is that the WHO had released data this year that said that during COVID, increase in depression and anxiety was between 25 and 35% around the world. Now, what we know about South Africa is that before COVID, we were already looking at 1 in 3 South Africans that do or have a mental health issue at some point in their lifetime. Due to the global research and the stats, is that number has definitely increased. So there's a bigger impact on a lot more South Africans. We're seeing more and more people dealing with depression and anxiety. And we've even seen that at the call center, is that we're receiving well over 3,000 calls a day from people around the country reaching out for some kind of mental health issue, depression, anxiety, trauma. So it definitely has increased and had a direct impact in South Africa.
Now, it's estimated that 9 out of 10 people with a mental health condition do not have access to mental health care. How are we going to move forward as a nation in curbing the issues of mental health care when access is still a problem?
Absolutely, and this is the biggest problem that we're dealing with as the mental health crisis in the country, is that only 1 in 10 people with a mental health issue access treatment. And that figures are not good enough. We need to be doing better. And tying in with the theme of making mental health a global priority, we have to make mental health a South African priority. We need to invest more money into the budget. We need to be investing more of the mental health care budget, which is around 45% of the entire health budget. We're having to increase more of that investment in mental health.
You were still taking us through the issue of access when it comes to 9 out of 10 people who have mental health issues but don't have access to any help.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. I think just hearing what the president was also talking about now and hearing the community frustrations, I think, also when we're talking about the mental health impact in communities, mental health is never on the agenda. And I think this is why it's so important when we look at the stats and the figures that only 1 in 10 people with a mental health issue have access to treatment. We have to be doing better as a country to prioritize mental health. And the ways that we could do that would be increasing or investing in mental health services in South Africa, making sure that all community clinics have access to a mental health professional and treatment for mental health conditions, but also investing in a lot more with regards to community mental health projects. More than 2/3 of the entire mental health budget is actually allocated to inpatient psychiatric care. And not everyone with a mental illness needs to be in hospital. We have to take our strategy, our priorities around mental health and take it back to the community where it makes the biggest impact. So we're calling on national government, provincial governments, local governments to be really transparent with their mental health budgets and spend, so that we can actually make sure that the right funds are being allocated to help people on the ground, especially since so many South Africans are impacted by mental health issues.
One other deterrent when it comes to mental health issues is the stigma that surrounds the issue. How do we move forward as a nation, especially when it comes to the stigma that's attached to mental health?
I think just talking about mental health issues is the first step in bringing a topic that's often kept in the dark and it's often very taboo and people are too afraid to talk about it. The more we can talk about it and debunk the myths and talk about how it impacts us and normalize the conversations around mental health is the first step to breaking the stigma. When we have more mental health champions who are sharing their own experience and stories and help us to break the picture of what we think mental illness is what we see in the movies, and it's all the scary doom and gloom. And someone living with a mental health condition could be someone in your household, someone that you work with, someone in your community or church. It affects so many of us. And I think as a country, we've seen stigma of mental health change so much in the last 10, 20 years. But when we're still hearing of people who are too afraid to open up or too afraid to tell their family or too scared to go get treatment, we're knowing that we have to do so much more to break that stigma, to encourage people to reach out before it's too late.
Then how important would collaborations be then, Cassey? Because you mentioned earlier on the importance of local, provincial and national government being transparent with regards to the budgets that they put out. But the collaborations between civil society organizations, the communities themselves, when it comes to making policies around mental health.
And it's so important, when we're looking at what is our strategy to combat the mental health crisis in the country, we really need all hands on deck. Often we see that mental health treatment is left in silos with government separate to civil society to mental health treatment. We're needing everyone around the same table to prioritize mental health and be on the same page with regards to our strategy in helping more people. So we're having to include civil society, NGOs. We need corporates and pharmaceuticals and local government. But we also cannot forget the role and the importance of including people with lived experience, people who are living or impacted with mental health issues, so that we're making sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all working together. We can't now be working individually or separately. We really do need a whole village to deal with the issues that we're dealing with on the ground.
Speaking of that village, Cassey, how do we do better, especially within our workplaces as well as our schools, in ensuring that people do have access and are able to open up?
I think, again, tying in with this global theme of making mental health a priority, we really have to look at making sure that mental health is a priority in the workplace, encouraging companies, whether they're small, medium or large enterprises, to have mental health policies in place, making sure that it's a safe space to talk about mental health issues and that employees are not punished or that there isn't punitive measures against employees who do open up and disclose that they have a mental health issue. Within the school environment, we're having to make sure that we're teaching our children how to talk about mental health, how to express themselves, and that we're creating services and support services at our schools. And this also includes supporting our teachers and training them, because they have so much to have to deal with on a daily basis. So our village, when we're looking at mental health and knowing that it doesn't discriminate, it affects anyone, anywhere, anyhow, we have to make sure in every space that we're in, whether at home, at work or at school, or even in our communities, is that we bring and prioritize mental health conversations in these spaces.
All right, that's Cassey Chambers. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon in this very important discussion, speaking ahead of World Mental Health Day, which is taking place on the 10th of October, with the theme, Make Mental Health and Wellbeing a Global Priority. Now,